Hi, and welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing women's unique challenges in the tech industry. And today I have with me Nidhi Gupta, and she is the founder of SheTO. Nidhi has built an incredible community supporting and accelerating women in engineering leadership roles. And Nidhi in this episode shares her innovation for starting the mission after realizing how few fellow women in VP and CTO positions she knew. She takes us behind the scenes of SheTO, from the immersive programs and events to the impactful peer networks they have cultivated. We also dive deep into inclusive hiring, discussing strategies beyond just candidate sourcing. Nidhi provides eye opening insights on creating a true sense of belonging from the very start so diverse talent can thrive within your organization. Get ready to have a powerful conversation filled with tangible advice to drive meaningful change and empower the next generation of women leaders. Hi, Nidhi. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Limor. Excited to talk about this today.
Yes, likewise. And the topics definitely are very, very interesting and important. And let's start maybe with inclusive hiring. Can you share maybe we'll start what it even mean? Let's start with kind of what does inclusive hiring even mean? Why we need it?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I think there's two. Let's just talk about definitions first, right? So we hear a lot about DE and I and what do each of these terms mean in themselves. So diversity means D for diversity. That is to invite people with different backgrounds and different thoughts to the party. Equity and inclusion are about ensuring that when you invite them to the party, they're able to make it to the party and they're able to thrive and enjoy when you're at that party, right? So when we talk about inclusive hiring, we want to make sure that we have diversity of thought and diversity of background represented in your teams, but at the same time that just by virtue of representation, it's not enough. We need to make sure that these diverse voices that you're bringing into the room on the table actually have a voice at the table. Otherwise, you've gone through all this effort for naught, essentially.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you hire, you want to make sure that you have inclusive hiring. So, what strategies you can share to create an inclusive hiring experience?
So let me ask you this. I think a lot of times we look at our organization as leaders and we're like, oh, the organization is just full of men, right? Especially true for engineering organizations.
Mm-hmm.
What's the first thought that comes to mind?
I'll share with you what my first thought came to my mind when I was hiring, that I want the panel to be diverse.
Okay, great. That's awesome. Because typically, I would tell you 9 out of 10 people who are listening to this, they'd be like, okay, let me go talk to recruiting, right? But I would say that's not the starting point. You don't start by talking to recruiting. You don't start by at the top of the funnel. You actually think of it as a circle. So you almost start at the back end and then work your way up to the recruiting team. So I would say I would first start by looking at retention,
Mm-hmm.
right? So and by virtue of looking at retention, so if you were lucky enough to have some diverse talent on the team, are they feeling included? Are they staying within the organization and with the company? And coming out of that exercise, you will actually look at the culture of your company and the values of your company. Then after you've tackled that, then you look at your company's comp philosophy and your organization's comp philosophy. Once you've made sure that you have no wage gaps and you have an equitable comp philosophy, then you look at your own organization and you look at your own team and its culture and inclusivity. Then you look at job requirements, like are they well defined, and are you ensuring that you're not just looking for that purple squirrel, and most likely that purple squirrel will end up being, you know, a cis white male, if you will. Once you've looked at your job requirements, and again, I'm not saying lower the bar, right? And I think a lot of times people misinterpret that to say, oh, I'm looking at, um, I'm asking to lower the bar. That's absolutely not the case. What you want to look at the skills that are required for the person to be successful in that role. And that is what your job requirements should be. And that is what your job description should be. Once you've done that, now you look at the interview process. As you said, you want to make sure that the interview panel is diverse. But at the same time, you also want to make sure there's a very clear rubric that's defined against which you're going to evaluate all candidates, so that you remove subjectivity as much as possible. And
Yeah.
it's only after that you get to talk to the recruiting team to say, okay, now let's strategize on where we find these candidates and how we diversify our pipeline, because now I'm ready.
Absolutely. So let me recap. So you said first start with retaining the diverse talent you have. To be honest, in my case, a lot of times I was trying to hire for the first woman in the team, and that was very difficult. That's why I started by saying to you, like, okay, I wanted to have a woman in the panel. And what
Mhm.
I did a lot of times was actually getting that woman from different teams, like
Yep.
borrow someone, because women,
Mhm.
sometimes they will not feel comfortable joining an all male team, and you have to work hard to convince them.
Yep. Yep. Very true.
And you mentioned about the job description. I want to share something that also the how you phrase the requirements is super important. What language do you use? Are you using a muscular language or a more neutral one?
Right.
Can you
Exactly.
relate?
Yeah, exactly. Like rock star is an example that comes to mind, or, oftentimes, whether it comes up in the job description or in your interview questions, it's more about like, okay, what personal projects have you worked on? There are like subtle ways that we essentially try to assess a candidate or put requirements on a candidate, which is catered to a very particular segment of society.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you mentioned a rubric. Totally agree with you. I even went as far as like defining the questions. Engineers didn't like it, by the way, but I said, okay, let's get to even defining what questions we ask. We don't have to follow them one by one, but we wanted to create, right, this unified view and not everyone translate it based on their judgment, biases, whatever.
Yes, exactly. And I think another example that comes to mind in terms of job requirements is, we often say X plus years of experience, right? Or serious degree is a
Mm-hmm.
must. And, you're really looking for like a senior or a staff software engineer. At that level, this is not an entry level position. At that level, do you really need a CS degree? Shouldn't their experience and skills count for more than their degree, right? So, and like, I will tell you, some of my best engineers have been those who come from non-traditional tech backgrounds, right? And some of my best engineers have been ones who have had very few years of experience, but they were just incredible. So you don't want to eliminate those people right out the gate. when you put these hard requirements in your job descriptions.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I hired people that had even, I think I hired even people that didn't finish high school. As you know, as much it sounds kind of strange, but eventually, what do you want? You want people who know how to learn because learning never stops.
Exactly, exactly. And this engineer that I'm thinking of, he was a long haul truck driver, right? And he was amazing. I would hire him in a heartbeat.
Exactly. And you mentioned the recruiting team. Let's talk about that. How do you help your recruiting team finding diverse pool? Because for me, it's been a struggle. I can share with you that.
It is, it is. And the way I think about this is, it is not just the recruiting team's job to diversify your funnel, right? The buck stops with you as a hiring manager, and it is a joint and shared responsibility between you, your team, and the recruiting team. The recruiting team is just there to support you. And a lot of times when the goals are set for the recruiting team for X number of candidates, diverse candidates at the top of the funnel, that is, in my mind, it's a starting point, but it's not the be all end all, because more often than not, you basically get cruft in the pipeline, which is not beneficial for anybody. So what you want to do is, you as a hiring manager need to strategize with both your team as well as the recruiting team in terms of how do you grow your network in order to find these candidates, right? So referrals are always a great source, but obviously you don't want to just rely on referrals. You want to build your network. I used to encourage my team as well as myself. I would intentionally reach out to a lot of people from different backgrounds, even when I was not hiring, because you just never know when you may want to hire somebody, and then you can tap into that network. So you need to really be intentional in terms of diversifying your network. Right? Now I'll tell you, before I started SheTO, I would look at my LinkedIn feed, and my LinkedIn feed was just full of engineering leaders who were men. I didn't even know that many women engineering leaders existed. And today, I've been super intentional now in terms of diversifying my network. And today, I will say a vast majority of my network in my LinkedIn feed, it basically is recognizing accomplishments of all these amazing women engineering leaders.
Yeah.
So it's doable, right? You just have to spend the time and the effort that it takes to do that. And I think the last thing I would say, and that's actually an easy answer today, tap into communities. There are communities that exist where you can easily grow your network and or diversify your pipeline. Right? There's SheTO, there's Alpha, there's a lot of other communities
Yeah.
where you can essentially go and very easily and quickly, it's sort of a cheat code now, where you can very easily go find different diversities within, and tap into these communities and or partner with them, and ensure that you are pretty much guaranteed to get a fairly diverse portfolio of candidates.
Yeah, for sure. And not just that, you also meet incredible women. You build your network, which is good regardless of hiring, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
always good to do that.
Yep. And some of the things that we used to do, I mean, I've had the same problem where basically the team didn't have any women, and all of the guys on the team, their networks were just men as well. And we did some interesting things where, a lot of times we've done these recruiting bashes, right? You order, a lunch, and basically over lunch, everybody basically goes through their LinkedIn and stuff like that. And we would basically dedicate days of, okay, today, just tap into your school network. Today, you tap into, because I think a lot of times when you say, hey, find me women, or find me people of color, or find me people with a non-traditional background. It's very hard. And people a lot of times draw a blank in terms of, I don't know any other women engineers. How do I find them or get connected to them? So if you create these avenues, you can actually make them feel more successful and give them avenues of like, okay, today focus on people who you went to college with. Today, focus on people who you worked with 2 jobs ago, right? So I think if you create these rubrics, then they're focused on that and they may come across people with different backgrounds as opposed to go find me this particular ethnicity or this particular background.
This is a great tip. I actually haven't thought about that. This recruiting bashes. Love that.
Yep, yep. I've done those pretty much in every single job that we had, and you this was like not in the virtual world, but in the physical world, you basically
Yeah.
just, hey, we'll buy you pizza, and pizza always helps.
Pizza wins. Yeah. No doubt about it. Yeah. Yeah, I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head here is that when you actually have an opening, it's usually very urgent. So you have time sensitivity, you have to fill it as soon as possible. There's a lot of pressure. And then you say, oh, but I want a diverse candidate. So it says, no, I don't have time for that, right? I don't have time.
Yeah,
I want to just find as soon as possible a good fit for this role. But when you have built that pool, that network ahead of time, you can tap into your network.
exactly, exactly.
Perfect. Love it. Okay, now you hire diverse talent, you hired a woman to your team. How do you keep her? Especially, when she is maybe sometimes the only woman there or one of very few women. How do you retain?
Yep. So I listened to this podcast, and there was an interview with Ariana Huffington. And she said something which actually was very interesting. Uh, she said, and I will share this. So she said that in her organization at Thrive, they do an entry interview. And what she meant by that is, she's like, we're all familiar with exit interviews, but an entry interview is, let's say, Limor, you're coming into my organization. I don't know what your constraints may be, right? So the conversation that we would have is, so Limor, what are the absolute no-nos for you from a meeting time standpoint? If we were to be organizing offsites, what works for you, what doesn't work for you? If we're doing team bonding exercises, what kind of activities work for you versus not? So this way, when somebody's coming into the organization, you try to understand what their constraints are. An example of a constraint could be, I have a child at home. I need to be home at 5 so I can spend 5 to 8 before their bedtime making dinner, checking on homework, spending time with them, and then there's a bedtime routine, right? And if you've done that, you are better informed that you need to be done by 5, their time, right? And I thought that was a very interesting idea, because that way you're sort of setting up your diverse talent for success, right?
I love that. And usually, what did she mention? If this is like an HR function that the HR kind of do it, or the hiring manager, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, right? I mean, I think if I were to do it, I would do it at the manager level,
Yeah,
because then you know exactly what you need to exactly what you have and what windows of time you have within your particular team, right?
that's that. That's an interesting idea. I haven't thought about
Yeah,
this.
yeah. And I think the other thing, it's so similar, in a similar vein, especially engineering teams, they are typically known for doing celebrations, like celebrate like after work hours, right? Oh, let's go have a drink. And basically everybody's headed to the bar. But guess what? not everybody drinks. Or same thing, if I have a child at home, I want to come back to my child and I don't have time to hang out with you at a bar. So don't do all your team get-togethers at a bar at 6 p.m. I will tell you, I used to do, before I had my daughter, I used to go out in the evening a lot with my engineering teams. But after I had my daughter, I just couldn't. So when I was interviewing at companies, I would make sure that their team culture, their team's working hours actually worked for me as a mom. And if the team was starting at their work at 11 p.m. and ending their work at 8 p.m., that was not the culture that could work for me, right? So you need to sort of look at the team culture, the work culture, and the fun culture, and make sure that that would work for this person that you brought into the team. I think code reviews is often overlooked in, especially in an engineering function. Uh, there is so much data, there are so many studies that have been done where women are inordinately penalized for during their code reviews than men. Right? So similar to the hiring rubric that we talked about, there needs to be special attention paid to your code reviews and make sure that your code reviews are equal and still welcoming for everybody on the team, if you will. And I think that's just, and I think then from a, we can talk about like, how you promote them, how do you recognize people's accomplishments and stuff like that, and make sure that all of that is as equal as possible.
Yeah, those are great tips. And yes, I can share code reviews that firsthand I've been, I don't know if to call it penalized, but I would say I got some comments on code reviews that really hurt me. I think a lot of times it's the insensitivity of men to
Mhm.
how women interpret what is written in code reviews that could be very blunt, right? And men would just, be okay with that. And women that, regardless of all that, already may have some insecurities about, okay, am I good enough? Am I good as my male counterpart? But then something like that can really throw a wrench in their, confidence. I wanted to ask you though another thing. Yes, you mentioned the drinking, all those things. I have done crazy stuff, with team activities that I didn't like at all, but I did that just to kind of be part of the group.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
what do you do when everyone works remote? This is one of the challenges today, not just for women, by the way, but especially if you're a woman starting out in a team, you don't know anyone, and everyone works remote.
Yeah, it is tough. It's very, very tough. So I think one of the big challenges in an all remote setup is how do you bond and how do you come together as a team and how do you have fun as a team? Um, so I've pretty much through most of my career, I've had distributed teams, and I've always hired the best talent regardless of where they were. And a lot of times I didn't have like hubs in different cities, so basically people would be working out of home. The way we were still able to create a strong belonging culture and a team culture was a few things. One was do coffee chats. And I do that even today, even with like, SheTO members, as an example, where there's no agenda. And the meeting is just scheduled as a coffee chat. So you're coming into the conversation fully knowing that you're just chit chatting, you're just getting to know each other. There's no agenda, there's no, takeaway or anything. Those work really, really well. And, I view them akin to doing a walk and talk with a
Yeah.
person, in an in-person setting. The other thing we used to do a lot of is silly things. How can we be silly together? Right? So We had, these crazy Slack bot prompts written, and, so the team used to have a lot of fun together. So, we're waiting to deploy something late in the night, or we're bugging, or there's the EOC rotation, and like the person is like really struggling because, it's a very buggy piece of software or issues that they're dealing with. Even in the midst of all of that stress, there always used to be somebody who would invoke something in Slackbot that would bring a smile to everybody's face, right? And these are very simple, small steps. And like in one environment, we had an office where a small subset of the team was, and everybody else was remote. Anytime the doorbell would ring, or there was a delivery, or there was food delivered, we had some ding dong bot. Like, it's just silly things, and I think the more you do it, the more fun the team starts to have. The one exercise, somebody started coding this, this Slack bot that I was mentioning, and then people got in the game, and then other engineers would keep adding other prompts to it as a surprise. So you're furiously typing something, complaining about something, and all of a sudden, basically, you get a silly prompt back from this bot and brings a smile to everybody's face. So I think the fundamental point being, you still can have fun together as a team, akin to like a water cooler talk that you otherwise would have had. So there are still ways to accomplish this, but yes, you have to make time for it, and you have to be intentional about
Yeah.
it.
I think being intentional is the key, right? It will not happen otherwise. And we used to do also happy hours on Friday afternoons, just for the sake of hanging out and talking. So I think, yes, you have it spot on. You have to find time and make fun. And there are multiple things you can do. You can do Secret Santa. We used to do Secret Santas, a lot of different activities, like fun stuff that you can do. Sometimes, even mail, it was going crazy, like even mailing people things. And they have
Yeah,
to guess who was it from.
yeah, exactly. So, so yeah, I think you have to be super intentional. And you mentioned happy hours on Fridays. Like, for example, I've always done Friday like equivalent of a wine and cheese, like a demo day or what have you, 4 to 5. So you basically celebrate what you've done throughout the week. You share with each other as to what you've been able to accomplish, and it's a great way to also build cross-functional camaraderie, right? Because you can also invite, other functions, especially sales and PMs and everybody, into the fold to showcase what you've done. That's very easily done virtually, right? It's a great way to wind down the team, bring everybody together, send everybody off to a happy weekend. And yeah, you have to work through time zones, but all doable.
Everything is doable if you have the motivation to do it. Everything is doable.
Yep.
I want to make sure, so I'm going to kind of start directing us to work talking about CTO, because I want to make sure that we talk about this incredible community that you built. So tell us a little bit about it and what kind of incentivized you to build it.
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. So, as you know, I've been, in the tech industry for a while, and I've been, a tech executive, engineering and led engineering and product teams through most of my career. And so I pretty much knew that, people like you and I, engineering leaders who are women, are very rare in the industry. And when I was a CTO and CPO at Hired, I got invited to this intimate dinner of CTOs. And I walk into the room fully expecting it to be a room full of men. And to my utter shock and surprise, I walked into a room full of 15 other women. They were all VPs, SVPs, CTOs at amazing Bay Area companies. And that sort of got me thinking. I was like, if I, having been in the industry for as long as I have, do not know of 15 other VP plus who are women, then how is the next generation going to find us and aspire to be us? And that's when I, sought data. And I came across a few studies, one of them being a Gartner study, which said that less than 9% of engineering exec roles are held by women. Uh, and I think that's really when I had an aha moment where I was like, the next month, I went to my CEO, I quit my job, and I said, this is what I want to focus on. So that's how SheTO came about, with the mission of finding as many women in engineering leadership as possible under the SheTO umbrella. And my goal was to build their high power network for them and accelerate their careers so that we can make a dent in this 9% number.
And this is incredible. You have an incredible community. I'm happy to be part of it. And I would love for you to share kind of highlights of what are the things that you do.
Absolutely. So, it's sort of, I think a community at one point takes a life of its own, if you will. So that in a nutshell, I think, is the journey that we've been on. My hypothesis going in was if I'm delivering impact, then growth will come. And I'm fortunate to see this hypothesis come true. So we do a ton of things because we know that women are overtaxed and overburdened. So we want to make sure that we are basically meeting them where they're at. So we do for the but first and foremost, the community is 100% vetted. So people apply to get in, and only if they meet our qualifying criterion are they allowed to participate in our activities. We do twice a month events, virtual events. We have a lot of peer groups so that people can meet with each other and connect with each other around certain topics. There's a CTO club, there's a directors club, there's a Gen AI club, there's a founders club, and so on and so forth. There is free mentorship, so we connect community with each other with in free one-on-one mentorship settings. We do a lot of L&D programs like the accelerator programs, which are immensely popular, and our workshops. And now we also have an annual summit that we host.
Yeah.
Last year was our first one, and we're planning a second one this year. So
Yeah.
there's always a lot happening at GTO.
Yeah. And for women out there that are still not part of CTO, how they can find you.
Yeah, it's just straightforward, sheto.org. Just go there, check out everything that we do, and sign up. And, it's an amazing, I think the thing that I love about GTO is that the reason why we have so much programming is because it's a very, very, very active community. And everybody joins the community with the intention of giving back, taking as well as giving. And I think that is remarkable to see. So even in this environment, like with interviews, there are free interview workshops, there are free interview practice sessions. That people are like, hey, I have an interview tomorrow, can somebody do a mock interview with me? Like, it's just incredible to see the willingness of community members to help each other advance their careers.
Wow, this is incredible. Thank you so much for creating this incredible community. And I'm sure it will be continuing to grow and thrive.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I will tell you, it inspires me every single day. So, could not be happier to see how far we've come.
Yeah. And how can people find you, Nidhi?
Mostly just LinkedIn or CTO. So when you fill out the join us form, if you want to connect with me, just add a note there, or you can find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'll put your handle on you. I love the content that you post. I avid follower of yours. So thank you so much, Nidhi. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you, Limor. This was a fun conversation. I'm so glad. Thank you for hosting me.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader. And coming up next week, I sit down with Dr. Sarita Bond. And we discussed the unique challenges faced by Black women in corporate America. And she gets very candid about lack of support, respect, discrimination, and the pressure to code switch. She provides eye opening strategies for overcoming biases and standing up for yourself. We also dive into her background as an Afro Latina entrepreneur in the fashion industry. So don't miss out this insightful episode, amplifying a very important voice. So tune in next week and see you soon.